Jean-Louis, welcome finally to the Leaders Who Care series. It's great to have you here.
Mark, thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah, I remember when we were in the Bahamas and we'd seen each other on Zoom, and I'm looking at you and I think I know that guy, but I'm not sure. And then you came over and said, "Yeah, really is me." So it was great to meet you in person, and now I'm excited to be able to share, and you have sharing with the world what you're doing, because I think it's really important and really cool. So let's start by briefly introducing yourself. We'll get to the business stuff in a minute, but who is Jean-Louis? Where you're from originally? Where you are now? Family? Something you've never told anybody in the world that you want to tell people now? That's always kind of cool. Share a little bit.
Yeah. Again, thanks so much for having me. So I'm Jean-Louis. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Future. And gosh, I grew up in small town Germany, all the way up in the north. Whereas my wife keeps reminding me it rains all the time. And I think quite early on, I think I had the kind of fortunate opportunity to use my time and think a lot about impact. I remember growing up, my mother actually took me to Kenya and at the time the slums of Mombasa. And it hit me at this, naive 13-year-old that there's this massive imbalance of how my life looks like and the opportunities and the joys that I get to experience, and what I'm seeing kind of with my eyes and the folks that I'm speaking to. And so I think from a very young age, I felt, look, there's an obligation to do something with the opportunities and the privileges that I have. And over time, right, you study more, you think more about the world. There's cynicism that's kind of coming in here and there. But I think growing up, I think this initial experience was simple. I was like, look, this isn't right. I have all these opportunities, and I see kids, teenagers my age who have none, and I should use the privilege that I've been given and try to play a part to affect at least some change to the extent that I have the ability.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I have a younger brother who is not so young anymore, as he also keeps reminding me.
Well, if he's not so young anymore, then what does that say about you?
I know. I think that was the inference is quite challenging there. Yeah, and I kind of live here now in Silver Spring, just outside of DC, with my wife Charlotte and our 4 kids. Yeah, and balancing a busy life at home and a busy life kind of growing an exciting company. And so it's you could say never a dull moment. There are lots of
How old are your kids?
So the youngest is 13 now, and the oldest is 21.
Oh wow!
So we have the full range, but we no longer leave the house with a diaper bag, which I'm quite grateful for.
Yeah, I can remember those days. Well, you see, you talked some cool stuff there about the impact it had when your mom or your parents brought you to Kenya, and now you're talking about your kids. Do you see any commonalities, any differences of thought and what they look like at the world, and what you did as a kid and a teenager versus even what they're doing as a kid and a teenager?
Yeah, no, I think this is a very interesting question, and I think I mean right now I think my kids are really fortunate. I think in terms of where they are in their lives, and I think we're constantly looking to kind of push their perspective and kind of create an opportunity for them to experience a very different part of life. And I think that's always a challenge. I think if you are living in the suburbs outside of Washington DC, right, life in other parts of the country, life in other parts of the world is looking very, very differently. And I think I would always want my kids to grow up with the same opportunity and experience that I had in kind of seeing that there are different different paths to life, and that we should be grateful for I think the kind of relative privilege that we've been given, and try to play a role to create opportunity wherever we can.
Yeah. Do they have different interests and whatnot, and or the same interests that you had as a kid, whether it's sports, music, the world? What does it look like?
Yeah, it's quite diverse. I'm one of those parents who initially, I think, was kind of really skeptical of some of the video games they're spending a fair amount of time on, until I realized the worlds that they were creating, and the diversity of the people they would meet.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, gosh, it was quite early on. I think it was kind of during COVID, where my daughter, who was kind of still quite young at the time, she was kind of playing a video game, and there was a chat, and everyone spoke Spanish, and so she decided right now she would have to learn to speak Spanish, so that she could kind of keep up with the conversations. And so it's so I think there are ways that I think I've learned to kind of embrace a different way of communicating and creating the worlds and connecting with other people than maybe what I was used to when I was growing up.
Yeah, lots have happened since we've all grown up. There's no doubt about it, and things are still changing. I noticed education-wise, you started with economics and international development. Was that what happened because of the exposure you had, for example, in Kenya? What were you envisioning at the time?
Yeah, so I became, I would say, pretty engaged at a very young age. So when I came back from Kenya, I was literally, again, I was this young kid trying to find ways to do something that might be useful, right? I mean, that's the best way that I can describe it. And at the time, I found this kind of wonderful organization of peers that were actually building schools and kindergartens in Bosnia and then the Kosovo.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of joined that organization, and over the years we've actually been able to mobilize hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students to basically drop out of school for a day, get a job at a big company or their local bakery, or mow the lawn of the neighbor, and then they would donate their day's kind of salary to our organization, and then we would kind of build vocational training centers. We did a fair amount of kind of nonviolent conflict resolution at the time, which meant that I spent a lot of time in Bosnia relatively shortly after the war, and then in the Kosovo. And I think I realized early on that some of the disparities that we were seeing really required a kind of a deep analysis of, like, how does the economy work? How do markets work? How do opportunities get spread around? Why are some folks blocked out of opportunities in kind of parts of the country where they live? And so I became a really obsessed economist to try to understand kind of how does this all work, which ultimately took me to the UK, to kind of study economics and international development and international relations, because I really had this obsession to kind of figure out markets and why opportunity was so unequally distributed.
Yeah, I've always found it fascinating how we get influenced by things as a kid that then leads to a thread of so many other things after that could have gone in a different direction. And how things evolved for you. I mean, you started with government related organizations and economics advisory roles, and then you went on to Black Ivy Group, and doing more impactful work in Africa. Share a little bit about that line.
Yeah, so for me, I think as I was looking at emerging markets, particularly markets across East and West Africa, I think what I saw growing up and what I saw later as a student was always kind of framed around conflict and poverty and challenges. And then when I first went to Ghana, kind of in the wake of my studies, I saw all of this opportunity. Right, there was opportunity to create jobs and build wealth, and so many kind of inefficiencies in the system. And so I started initially a research effort at Oxford University to kind of document that there are great investment opportunities in these markets. I remember when I was just an undergraduate, the Harvard Business Review kindly agreed to publish one of my student essays. It was around kind of opportunity in fast-growing emerging markets, which at the time was not mainstream, right? In fact, quite often they laughed me out of the room when I there's Ghana, and Ghana has this amazing opportunity to invest, and there's Kenya, and you should put your money there. And so that kind of became a really big focus of my life. I've had opportunity to work on this when I was in the Obama administration, and then at the Black Ivy Group, it was really around incubating essential businesses that are serving people's lives, right? It was healthcare, food and logistics, and housing. So really, bare essentials where sometimes the kind of technologies and solutions and products and services that that we kind of take for granted, there's weren't as readily available in the market. And so that was an opportunity to really kind of do good and do well. And I've done this for almost 10 years, I would say. And then I increasingly noticed, spending a lot of time in places like Ghana, Kenya, and Tanzania, that climate change was popping up everywhere.
There's no such thing as climate change. What are you talking about?
and so like small things, right? Like the folks at the job site say, like, we cannot pour concrete because it just rains all the time now, and we don't know what's going on. Farmers that we were purchasing potatoes from were kind of suffering in Kenya these incredible droughts and heat waves and kind of climate related disasters. And so it became clear to me that everything I've come to deeply care about was impacted by climate change in the most profound way, and I was totally ignorant about it. And so I tried to become less ignorant, and kind of looked at the data, looked at kind of how it's impacting people's lives, the relationships between kind of temperature rises and some of the increasing disasters that we're seeing all around the world. And I was shocked, right? I figured, look, this is real, this is big, and this is going to come for all of us in the end of the day. And so I became kind of laser focused on climate change, and kind of again trying to find a way to make a contribution where I can.
Yeah, that's we should have everybody have that experience, basically, and wake up, if you will, about things like that. And it kind of is a good segue to,
Also, Mark, just to maybe interrupt, right? I think because so I think I first saw this really deeply in kind of parts of East and West Africa. I mean, where sometimes the conditions were just horrendous, right? Really unlivable in some of those communities. But then, here, living in the suburbs of DC, right? There was the year where our basement flooded 3 times, right? That has never happened before, right? We live kind of on a on an elevated street, and usually the basements don't flood because, the water kind of runs past our house. We had not one, but two trees fall on our house because of these massive storms, right? So I think there are obviously areas that are particularly hard hit across the world, but in the end of the day, I think it's happening everywhere. I was coming back from New York on the Amtrak, and I stepped on the platform in Baltimore, and all the phones started to beep all of a sudden, right? Because everyone on the platform got this emergency warning to shelter in place immediately because there was a tornado a few miles away. This is Maryland, right? This has never happened in kind of my recollection of living here. And so I think, yes, there are hard hit areas, but I think, as the kind of threat of climate change continues, I think it will just be felt quite universally everywhere.
Well, we're being given hints, major hints for a long time now, and COVID was one of them. I mean, just even that was one of them. And the floods, Miami just had 2 days of floods that was 2 months of rain, basically.
Yeah.
And this isn't like an accident or just like, once in a blue moon. And I saw an interview with Bill Nye, not to get too far off here, who, Bill Nye, the science guy, I guess he goes by. And he said there's probably not even going to be a tipping point anymore, where the tipping point is where you actually say, oh my God, we got to do something. It's just going to keep getting more and more and more. And he said there's still time to do stuff, but how much notice, how many hints do we need from Mother Nature that this is real? And so we've got to get, we got to get with the program. And so we'll do a sequel, on that topic alone, because I think it's it is a huge topic, and we're starting to see it here now. And if we don't wake up, it's going to get worse. The part, it's kind of a good segue. The fourth industrial revolution is looked upon as technology, AI, VR, VR, AR, et cetera, but the fifth is also being looked upon as humanity and how they fit together. And in our business, we use technology to bring impact and talent together, because you need great talent to make the impact, and so on and so forth and whatnot. You've now moved on to something I'm really excited about. I guess one way I can put it is you've moved on to the future, if I can say it that way. And with your present venture, co-founder and CEO, where you're highlighting the value to make economic and social and environmental impact at the same time. Very good segue from what we're talking about is how do you make an impact on that? Tell us how this became real for you, and how it works as a business and the overall impact that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, and so I kind of spoke a little bit about kind of how I've kind of come to kind of spend my time on climate and some of the experience I've had, particularly in East and West Africa, and I've came to this really with a high amount of ignorance. Right, I was always interested in how markets work and how decisions are made, and like, why do we do stuff?
Right.
And so that I think was always a big fascination for me. But yeah, complete ignorance on climate and the drivers and climate change and what we can do about it. And so I first kind of figured, okay, well, what can we do as a family, right? So my first idea was, right, let's just plant some trees, right? And that seems like a good idea.
It is a good idea.
And then I asked a kind of few friends, who are much smarter than me on these things, like how many trees will we have to plant to like offset our footprint? Like we calculated everything, we tried to understand, and it had about 7,600 trees, and then you have to look after them every year and make sure they grow and and I said, that's like a forest, right? I mean, that's a lot of trees. And so it kind of became clear to me just in our own experience that like, this can't be it, right? I mean, like, how is everyone going to have like their own forest? Like, this is going to be like, I was kind of trying to, count my neighbors and look at my neighborhood and like, that seemed pretty hard. And then I realized that what's not hard is just to change kind of how we consume, not give up things, right? Not spend more money, but change how we consume, just reimagine it. And we save about $25,000 a year. We reduced kind of about 15 tons of carbon as a family, not by doing things that were hard, but by doing things that were fun and that put more money into our pockets and that our kids got super excited about. Right? I mean, one example, we had 2 cars, now we have 1 car, and daddy got a scooter from back market. We bought it refurbished, right? I look ridiculous, right? I but it's fun, right? It's fun and it's cheap. And so in the end of the day, I think my big kind of aha moment for future is that like we're looking at all these green choices in completely the wrong way, right? Where we're kind of telling you to have a cold shower and give up the stuff that you love. When I could be telling you, hey, get these awesome things, save a bunch of money, get some extra rewards, and transition into the green economy because it's just a better experience for you. And that's ultimately what Future is all about, right? We are introducing our members to ways to save a ton of cash, learn about kind of new products that are coming up that are making their lives more convenient, that are helping them lower the carbon that they are emitting every day. And Future is now leveraging financial technology to constantly help members earn more cash and emit less carbon.
So I would think something like this could be great for employee benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we actually we rolled out employee benefits where companies that are looking to hit their climate goals, right, can actually incentivize and inspire their employees to get solar. Right, today I'm working from home. Right, I have solar on my roof, and so the emissions of me working are significantly less than they would be if I was kind of powering everything from the grid. And so employers have a big opportunity to meet their climate goals by leveraging their talent, their teams, to commute to work, to switch to electric vehicles, to electrify their homes, to adopt renewable electricity, to shop secondhand. And so I think there's a massive lever that we're not yet pushing, where employees could get a great deal and interesting new opportunities, but the company also materially lowers their Scope 3 emissions,
which can be reported in their ESG or their CSR or all this stuff.
Right, which in California now will have to be reported as kind of part of new regulations. And so yeah, we've had a lot of interest in this, and I think it kind of comes down to this really empowering message, right? Like, we have a lot of agency, a lot of opportunity as consumers to have a real impact. Like, I decide what I drive, right? If I want to, go to the gas station and fill up my car, I go to the gas station and fill up my car. But if I don't want to do that, then I have the opportunity now, in a way that is financially accessible and rewarding, to transition to an electric vehicle. And now I no longer go to the gas station, right? Well, that is my choice.
And I think that's important. That's an important part. Sorry to interrupt, where it's really hard to get people to do things when you tell them to do things, right? Because if you tell a person not to think of a pink elephant, all they can think about is a pink elephant, basically. And so you're giving them an opportunity. I think it even can fall under the mental health, umbrella, even, about how that could make you feel good that you're doing something and is good for that. So I think there's a lot of avenues to go down. And what about even in schools?
Yeah, so we're not doing anything in schools at the moment, but I think it's a huge opportunity to do kind of fun things with schools, and even have schools compete against each other, right? I mean, we compete in all sorts of sports, right? It would be interesting to compete on something that tremendously matters for our future, with kind of schools figuring out like what are the means and opportunities at our disposal, collectively, to actually reduce carbon, and do that in a way that's, again, financially accessible and really rewarding for everyone that's participating.
What are some of the other things that have come up that people can do aside from maybe the obvious of the car, of recycling or whatever? Are there some unusual things that people don't think about?
Yeah, and I think I think for us, I think the key part is this is accessible for everybody, and the, you know, one thing that I'm proud of is that as I look at our members, it's you know, diverse kind of across really all dimensions, and that, I think, has always really been important to our team, and so yeah, I mean, there are things that feel small that have a massive impact, like, you know, changing your thermostat in the summer, from 68 to 74, for example, right? 74 is still, you know, nice and comfortable. Massive impact, right? Because that is the bulk of your energy bill, is kind of everything that you're spending on AC. So kind of things like this, right, have a massive impact. And I think often we think about, you know, LED lighting, and we think about recycling. All of these things are important, but it's kind of small things like, you know, changing my thermostat just a little bit, you know, where I'm still comfortable, but maybe I don't need to put a jacket on in the summer. That makes a tremendous difference. And I think the other piece is really looking at circular consumption. Mm-hmm. And we go through this a lot with our kids right now, because obviously everyone wants the latest gadget, right? And the new iPhone comes out and we gotta have it, right? Right? But if you then have an opportunity to actually get a phone that is almost exactly as good, right, and that is costing 80-90% less, that's what I'm going to do as a parent. And if I can then tell my kids, you know, by the way, this is great for our budget, but it's also really good for the planet, right? It's helping a bunch, because we're actually using these refurbished devices. Makes a big difference, and it means in the end, you know, my wife and I feel good about our budget. You know, kids feel good about the impact that they're having, and in the end of the day, the phone does basically almost exactly the same stuff.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you're incentivizing, and at the same time, I do think it has an impact on mental health. In fact, there's a big demand now, if we're talking specifically about phones, about not letting them in schools, not giving smartphones to kids until they're 16, give them other phones, but not smartphones. And you know, if it impacts our mental health, then that's also going to be a big plus to not just impacting the planet, but you got multiple benefits that I think are happening there. And if people feel good, generally they'll start doing more good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where, like, we know so much now from you know, behavioral psychology, behavioral economics. We kind of, you know, there's a whole celebrated book written just about nudges, and we just have to start applying that to all of our kind of green choices. And so what Future is doing, we're literally giving you VIP tickets to take the bus, right? Like, we celebrate this. You get the same kind of awesome perks you would get from an airline, you now get with Future when you ride the train, or you ride the kind of subway every day. And I think that's the kind of philosophy behind Future. Most of our members are with us because we're giving them the best deal, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we really want to be able to reach everybody, and make the transition to more and more green choices affordable, accessible, and really, really fun and rewarding.
No, I love what you do, and that's why I said, like, the future is now. I'm sure that's been used before, but I like it anyway. So how do people get on and find out and what it is?
Yeah. So today, Future shows up in the market as a rewards account and a debit card. It's actually today hands off the most rewarding debit card in America, right? We give you 1% cash back for everything, and then we give you up to 6% cash back on millions and millions of green choices, right? From paying your energy bill to taking the bus or taking the metro, to thrifting and shopping secondhand, to charging your electric vehicle.
So where do they sign up on?
So you sign up at future.green.
It's easy.
And then we are the Future card across all of the social handles.
That's amazing you were able to get that name. That's for the Future card. That's pretty cool.
Yes, we just trademarked Future. We just got the letter from the US Patent and Trademark Office that we just got the Future trademarks.
Just when you think everything's taken, maybe it's not taken, type of thing. Well, we always say in LA anyways, we say leave them wanting a little bit more so we can do a sequel. So we'll probably have to do a sequel at some point. But I have one last question on this part. A client told me in 2021, he said, Mark, the year 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought that was pretty cool comment. And now we're already halfway through 2024. Sometimes the pandemic feels like it was yesterday and yet years ago, all at the same time. With all of that, tell us what you're most grateful for and what you're most hopeful for.
Yeah, so I think if lots of things I'm tremendously grateful for in my private life. I think as I look at Future, we're now almost have 50,000 members who've kind of given us their trust, who are jumping on this train to a greener, a greener economy. And I'm tremendously grateful for that kind of faith in what we're building and the level of interest and enthusiasm. It still gives me kind of chills when I'm in New York, and we have a lot of members now in New York, and someone is there and they pay with their Future card and they get excited about the rewards that they are receiving. So I think I'm very grateful for this, and I think what makes me hopeful is that there's I think a better and more nuanced understanding around the sheer power that we have as consumers to reimagine how we consume. And I often mention Zoom, actually, right? We're on a Zoom call right now. A couple of years ago, this wasn't even a thing. Yep. And now everyone's doing it, right? It's hard to kind of go into a room and you ask kind of people who's done a Zoom call or a Teams call or Google Hangouts, or I know there's still some others, but and it's ubiquitous.
Yep.
Like, we get to choose how we engage with the world, and that is tremendously hopeful and powerful. And we don't have to give up everything we love, and we don't have to have cold showers every day if we don't want to. Right? There's things that are within our control that we can do to change our future. And I think that's hopeful, and it's also tremendously empowering.
Well, I think I'm happy that you are a leader who cares, and kudos to your mom and dad for taking you to Kenya and making that impact on you to get you to the point right now that you're in what you're doing. So there's always a thread along the way there. So thanks for joining us on this and the great stuff, the great difference that you're making in the world.
Mark, really, thank you for having me, and looking forward to the sequel and to being in touch again shortly.